all these things get corrupted, and particularly today, we just, the size of the U.S. federal government is it's the biggest organization in the history of the world. There's nothing, there's not even a close second.
And it's got survival instincts.
Yeah.
It doesn't want to give up ground. It doesn't want to give up power.
Well,
it wants to keep expanding. It wants more funding for its projects. It wants to hire more people to deal with something in an incompetent way. And it's not like the free market where, if it's incompetent, there's going to be a competitor that comes along and does a better job, and you're going to lose the market. No.
Well, you ever look at the if you look at the list of the richest counties in America, and they're I forget the exact numbers. It's
all lobbyists.
Well, it's 10 of the. They're all, not all, but the vast majority of them are right outside Washington D.C. and right outside New York City. And so, what is that? Is that capitalism? Do you go to Washington D.C. and you go, oh, there's more millionaires there than there are in any other part of the world in the suburbs around Washington D.C.? Is that because there's great big factories and they're making so much stuff that everyone wants to buy? It's no, that's because our centralized federal government spends over $6 trillion a year. And where does that money go? It goes into all the people who are connected to government. And why is it outside of New York City? Is it because in New York City they have great big factories where they're making all the things that everyone wants? It's no. And that's not because of capitalism. That's because Richard Nixon took us off the gold standard, and now it's just this phony casino Wall Street money. So it's everybody, all the people at the top who are making all of this money. They're not making it. It'd be one thing if you're John D. Rockefeller before he went and colluded with the government, and you created Standard Oil, right. And now there's this big oil company, and you're making the country richer by this. But they're not making the country richer. They're extracting wealth out of the rest of the population. It's all just extracted. I mean, literally, the federal spending is extracting wealth out of people by taxing them and then spending it, literally taking the money from people who work and giving it to politically connected people. And then the Wall Street money is just printing money and then making your dollar less valuable. So just in another way, extracting wealth from the people. And this is basically why we live in this populist moment right now where so many people are so freaking furious at the establishment because they're right to be.
They're right to be. It's a shit system. It's a shit, scary system that you can never beat if it gets to make its own rules.
Well, it's not what America was supposed to be.
It's so wild. The stock market is such a wild idea that it's based on confidence, and you bet on companies.
Yeah,
you're essentially betting on buying and selling, and you can wreck them and you can own them, and and there's people that just play that game. All they do is chase after businesses, short businesses. You could short a country.
Yeah. No, it's pretty wild. It's pretty wild, and
it's the craziest gambling.
But this is also, to go back to Ron Paul stuff. This was at the center of his campaign. I don't think anybody else outside of the Libertarian Party will put up candidates who talk about this stuff. But Ron Paul was the only one in a major party who got a huge amount of traction behind him, but where he was look, this is all when you have a fiat currency system and you go off of any type of gold standard or anything that kind of limits the government's ability to just print as much money out of thin air as they want to, you get this thing where we live in a cycle of constant inflation. And this is something that people don't put that much thought into. When you're talking to your grandma or something and she's in my day a bottle of Coke was a nickel, right. We just take that almost as yeah, well, that's how it works. Things over time get way more expensive. That's just how, because that's been so just how we've always experienced life, that it's just a given that everything's always going to be a little more expensive. And we may have a bad year where things are 9% more expensive, and then maybe we'll have a better year where things are only 2% more expensive, but it's always going in this direction. Right. But that's not a law of nature. That doesn't just have to be that way. And in fact, if you looked at from the year, say, 1800 to the year 1900, somebody talking to their grandparents would have had the complete opposite thing. They would have been oh my God, it was so much more expensive when I was young, and now things are getting cheaper. And in fact, the natural tendency in a society that's developing, the natural pressure is for things to get cheaper. Because if you just think about it, right, you get more efficient at making them. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
You get more efficient at making them. You can make more things with less manpower. That would naturally put a downward pressure on prices. But because the government keeps printing money, the value of the money goes down, and so we live in this system where things get more and more expensive. But then when you have that, right, and then you have all types of government incentives on top of that, right? So it's okay, first of all, if you just hold your money, because this is what people used to do many generations ago, was the idea of just saving your money. You save it. But if you just save your money today, Joe, you're a sucker because of this system, right? Like if you just hold your dollars, you're just losing money actively. So you got to be chasing interest. In order to just not lose money, you have to be chasing an investment. You know what I mean? You have to be like gambling on something. And so now, and then of course there's also other like tax incentives where like you can kind of defer taxes if you invest in things. And so you're kind of like pushed into, you know, like, well, put it in your 401k, put it in this, put it in that, and then you won't. But just think about that, like logically, aside from being really good for rich bankers, why would you think that it's a good, for like an average, you know, say like couple who's just like working and making money, and they don't know anything about stocks and bonds and trading, you know, exchange traded funds and what to invest in and what not. Why would you say that you should be working? No, you shouldn't be working and saving a little bit for your retirement. What you should be doing is gambling. You should always be gambling your money constantly. Isn't that sound financial advice? Gamble, and gamble on something that you don't understand.
Right. And you've done no research on.
Yeah. Trust someone who works on Wall Street.
Do you remember that time about a year or so ago where banks started failing? Remember that? Remember how spooky that was?
Yeah.
Where banks started going under, and there was a real concern that it would cause a cascade effect.
They were very, very concerned about that. Yeah.
And it didn't, but it got close, and we had never heard about that many banks. I mean, there was a savings and loan crisis. Remember when a bunch of those places went under?
Yeah.
I remember that. I found out about that because Vinny Pazienza, the boxer, lost a bunch of money in one of those.
Oh, really?
Yeah, like, you know, I think his life earnings. I think he lost a shitload of money. Like, quite a few people have lost a lot of money in these fucking things. Where banks go under.
Yeah.
Like all of a sudden you lose everything. Like, what? You don't have my money?
Well, and
There's
of course,
no money.
in 2008, that was the big one, you know, in 2008, and they really set a precedent there with that kind of too big to fail line of logic, where if that's true, that the banks are too big to fail, and then you bailed all of them out, and now they're bigger than they were then they're really too big to fail now, right? So it kind of perpetuates this idea that the banking system, and everybody kind of knows this, the banking system is built on a house of cards. And it could collapse at any moment. And if it does, the federal government's going to have to come rob you of your money to give to a bunch of bankers again. That's our system. That's our financial system.
And the CEOs of those banks still got bonuses.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. They all still got bonuses.
They said they had to give them bonuses, otherwise they would leave and go other places.
And it shows a real like eroding of something completely different than the political system, just our culture, that there wasn't at least like enough shame of those people to just go, yeah, I'm gonna not take my bonus this year because I don't want to get dragged through the streets and like killed by the citizens of this country. I don't want to feel like that. And it's not as if these people didn't already have tens of millions of dollars, like they really needed their bonus from this year, or like little Timmy isn't going to get his Thanksgiving turkey.
A yacht.
Yeah, it's like, no, I want a fifth yacht.
Yeah,
like it's like that level.
Yeah,
but the whole banking system is it? What's the Oh man, I'm gonna get this. What's the Christmas movie where they kind of go over fractional reserve banking? Is it It's a Wonderful Life? Or the one where they're like, where they all come into the bank, there's like a bank run and they want their money, and he's like, oh, but don't you see, your money's over here at Frank's farm, and then his money's over there, and that's how. But like, I can't remember which one it was, but anyway.
Was that It's a Wonderful Life? Is that what it was?
Yes, I think it was It's a Wonderful Life. Oh, no, maybe not.
Old ass movie.
No, but it's an old one. But the whole system of fractional reserve banking is really kind of this fascinating like thing, because everybody still kind of has in their mind that if you kind of have in your mind that the money in your bank account is your money and that you're holding it, that they're holding it for you.
Right.
But that's not right. That's not what's going on. And if you ever actually read like the contract that you sign when you open a checking account, that's not what it is. It's more like you're loaning money to the bank and they owe that money to you. But they don't have to give it to you. You could, legally speaking, you could walk in tomorrow to a bank. I mean, no one actually walks up to a teller anymore.
It's a Wonderful Life isn't a Christmas movie. It's a banking movie.
Oh, yeah. So that is the scene. I was right about that. Okay. But so you could walk into the bank tomorrow and your checking, account balance is whatever, say it's $5,000, and you could go, I'd like to take out $2,000, and they can say no. You can't have it. Now, they owe it to you, technically, but they don't have to give it to you. They're not just holding it for you to give to you on demand. Now, the system hasn't collapsed, so they will give that to you today if you walk into a bank. But
if too many people come in and they want too much money.
Well, they don't have it. Yeah. Is the point. So when you open a bank account, and I don't know exactly what the reserve rates are now because I know they did change this during COVID, but for a while it was 10%. Was what the Federal Reserve set as the reserves that you had to put away. So when you come into your bank and you give them $100 to open a checking account, just to make it an easy number, they hold $10 and they loan out $90. And now, so they'll loan that money out, and so essentially they owe you $100. But the effect of this, right, is that now there's this guy. So let's say you open the account with $100. Now there's another guy who takes out a loan for $90, and you're now in the economy, and kind of like you think you have $100, and he thinks he has $90, but really there's not $190. There's only $100. That you get what I'm saying? But now here's where it gets even crazier than that. This guy doesn't just hold his $90, he goes and puts it in the bank. And so the bank holds 10% of that money and then loans out 90% of that to somebody else, who then puts that money in the bank. And then they take 10%. So when you actually look at the effect of it, there's like not nearly as much money in the bank as we all think we have in the world. So essentially, if everybody came into the bank, or even just too many people came into the bank and said, we'd like to withdraw our money, there's nowhere near enough money for them to give you. So inherently, the whole thing is kind of a house of cards.
It's like when you're going to a stadium and you try to use your cell phone, you realize there's no signal, even though you have 5 bars.
Right.
Because everyone's using their phone.
Mm-hmm.
So there's no signal for you. You can't get online. You can't make a phone call.
Right. Like this thing only works if we're not all trying to do it at the same time.
Exactly.
But if we do, then we're